right. Hey, everybody. I am Robb Lamb. I am the Director of Performance at IRG. I work out of the IRG Sports Institute and Physical Therapy Clinic over in Fremont. So we wanted to put together a webinar series to help coaches out. I think, sport coaches always have so much to deal with, and you're so good at certain things, and then you have other things that I think it helps to just have a little bit of help with sometimes. So this is going to be on conditioning for the team sport athlete, and we're just going to go through define some key terms. We want to be able to give kind of a cheat sheet, methods, principles to kind of help you work with your own team and design your own things and kind of know when to push and when to pull back. And then, as we run through this, if anybody has any questions, just put them in the chat, and then we will make sure that we get to those at the end of this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get this thing going. All right. So like we said, conditioning for the team sport athlete. So we're going to go through kind of like 4 basic things here. So we want to define what repeat sprint ability is, because that's basically for, field and court sports. That's, most of those sports, other than maybe volleyball, this is what we're trying to improve here. We want to talk about what limits performance, just to have a better idea of how to train those things. So obviously we're going to go through on how to train those rate limiters for performance. And then we want to make sure that we give everybody just some strategies, some methods, and then even, like we said, some cheat sheets for coaches to kind of go build off of. These are not meant to be like all or none. This is definitely for you to kind of help just build your own out, what works best with your team. So repeat sprint ability is the thing that we're, for a lot of sports that we're trying to improve. And that is just repeated or near max efforts, interspersed with brief recovery periods. So if we're thinking about maybe something like soccer, a sprint up the sideline followed by just kind of like a easy jog, walk, things like that. And then being able to do that over and over again throughout the game while being able to keep your speed up or keep your velocity up when you have those just kind of brief recovery periods and being able to recover and do that again. And so we need to talk about what limits performance. So we're going to kind of talk about some of these terms and then kind of go through, like, in English, what does that actually mean? So there's 5 of these that we're going to name off here. So phosphocreatine resynthesis, what that actually means is basically just you're trying to have a good base of aerobic conditioning. So if you're thinking about that kind of like lower zone, lower intensity, you're on the bike, for 20 to 40 minutes at kind of a lower intensity pace, still having that good aerobic base is going to allow that athlete to be able to recover more efficiently between sprints. Anaerobic glycolysis, so that can limit performance. Again, what does that actually mean? The body uses energy for, your all-out sprint or your max power things. And then sometimes because of that, you've used this energy and you get these kind of byproducts in the muscle and the system. And the athlete needs to be able to utilize that energy to kind of train their body to remove those byproducts to do it again. So think like, that old feeling or kind of like classic thing that we're taught, like, oh, you have I feel like I have lactic acid buildup, things like that. Your body's getting better at removing those and being able to do that same performance again and again and again. Aerobic metabolism. So basically what you're trying to do throughout some of these different training methods is you're trying to get better at resisting fatigue. And so you need better oxygen uptake to your muscles, to your cardiopulmonary system. You need muscles to regain oxygen and energy quicker so they can go ahead and do the same thing again, do those big bouts of powerful energy. And then again, with this, you're just trying to gain a higher threshold before all that lactate and hydrogen kind of like cause fatigue and make you feel fatigued. So you're just trying to push away fatigue, basically. This is kind of like, so not lactic acid. That's not necessarily what happens when you're getting fatigued. You get kind of hydrogen ion accumulation. Does that really matter? Because we're going to train it the same, but basically there's not a ton of research is kind of limited here, but we're talking about how do we clear this to get ready for the next bout of work. So think about this as like buffering. And if we're buffering, we're trying to push off the threshold before we actually get fatigued, basically. So you're just trying to get better at max sprints, and then with less and less time needed for recovery to be able to do that again and again. And then the last thing here, the last kind of rate limiter here is just muscle activation. It basically just means strength and power training. So different types of strength, stuff like that we train here at the Sports Institute. So it'd be like max strength, which is kind of your classic, just like heavy squat, deadlift, bench, things like that. Where you're getting like 3 to 5 reps at some heavy weight, pretty close to failure. So you're able to produce force and put force into the ground while sprinting. Reactive strength, so think about like just plyometrics, things that you're getting off the ground really, really quickly. So fast ground contact times, sprinting kind of almost falls into that too. And then explosive strength, so getting really fast at jumping with loaded weights. That could be like Olympic lifting variations, loaded jumps, loaded sprints, things like that. To kind of help with that strength and power aspect of not limiting performance and raising your sprint speed so you can recover faster and keep doing that again. So we're gonna talk about methods and strategies. So methods are kind of like the how, and training strategies or this kind of the what or why. And so with these are just some examples of how, like, what you're training when you're doing this. So repeat sprint training would be a combination of interval training and repeat sprinting during practice. So that could be you're just doing intermittent sprinting. So which would be sprinting at full speed, and then you get full recovery between reps. So longer recovery periods so you can hit those same sprint times. So if you're working on speed here. Repeat sprint exercise is more of a conditioning base. So you're shorter recovery between reps. So again, you're trying to buffering and kind of you're trying to train your body to be able to put off fatigue a little bit more. Sprint training, again, is just short sprints and longer recovery periods. So you're getting better at the speed aspect, but we're not focused on the conditioning or buffering on recovery aspect. Small-sided games are also a really great way to help develop high-intensity fitness and even some like aerobic-based fitness. If it's something that you're not moving really high intensity, you have a smaller space to cover. Small-sided games are a great way to kind of develop deceleration, change direction ability, but you're also getting some of those conditioning methods in there too. And then resistance training. So just kind of classic strength training is going to help with that sprint performance that you need for that repeat sprint ability. So obviously, when not just being able to repeatedly sprint, but making those sprint times more effective, aka faster. So these are just some templates. Again, this is not all or none. These are just some things that we use here to make sure that if we have like an off-season athlete, so this is just an example of what an off-season athlete might go through, and you can again make these work for you. So I'll explain just kind of the off-season template here. So this is just an example of what a 4-week template might look like. You could do this once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, depending on how you're recovering and what else the athlete is doing. So week 1 and repeat sprint training mode, basically. So you're looking at just straight line sprints. You could do curve sprints, just knowing that, if you start throwing other variables in there, it's going to be a little more stressful. So usually we'll start a little simpler. Something like 3 sets by 6 reps. We'll keep the rep distance around 30 meters. And then the inter-rep rest. So that basically just means like you go through the rep at 30 meters, you've got 20 seconds rest. And if we put passive in there, that just means that you're sitting there resting. You're not doing anything. You're not moving around. Then after you finish that first set of 6 reps, you get 3 minutes of recovery, and then you get to do that again. So it's not a really long session here. We're talking total 13 minutes, and then you can look at the session volume. You got 540 meters. So as you see, week 2 is pretty much the same thing, making sure they get used to that, and then week 3, you're actually covering a total of 720 meters, just because those distances are a little bit longer. And then, so, same thing, you can start to throw in like curve sprints, or slalom just means kind of diagonal sprints. So there's a little bit of change of direction aspect in there. Plus, it just keeps it a little less boring for the athlete. But this is, again, just an example of a template that we could use for off season when you're just kind of ramping up for the season. This is a preseason template. So again, like we're prepping for the season. We want to make sure that these athletes are prepped for the contacts they're going to get, for the total volume that they're going to run. So you're going to see these things go up. The total work is going to go up. The intensity is going to go up. So again, you can keep these linear, curve, slalom. This can be contact, where you're in contact with another athlete, kind of competing, things like that. But again, more sets, more reps. You're slowly increasing the distance here, and which means you might have more rest periods between reps, and then shorter rest periods between these sets. So again, it's nice to be able to kind of understand, okay, this is just a progressive method, because now we're getting into like 800 meters per session here. So just again, prepping for the season. And then in season, we want to make sure that, we're keeping sharp, we're keeping our high speed sprints, especially for those athletes who might not play as much. So again, a lot of different methods to do this. I just put, straight line sprints and change direction shuttles. Those are just ideas, but you could do this however you want. Again, like less total sets here, but we're looking at higher intensity bouts, and keeping the volume the same here. So a lot of different options here for in season, for change of direction and linear speed. But again, we want to make sure that we keep their workload high, so they're continuing to tolerate these things. So the how. So this is just kind of like methods that you can use for moderate or low intensity, high intensity, repeat sprint training, things like that, and make this work for you. This is just based off of different methods that we see. So we want to make sure, again, that like you're not skipping steps here. We want to make sure that these athletes come in with some sort of aerobic base. They've been doing enough to kind of build up that long duration. It's easier to train. And what we see with adaptations here at the bottom of the pyramid for aerobic, it might take people anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months to kind of build this up. But we just want to make sure people are aware of that we need to take a little bit of time to build that base, because that's going to be really key for recovery when you're getting into higher intensity things. Lactic anaerobics, or getting kind of like medium duration stuff. And those adaptations, can usually go for 2 to 3 weeks. And then power, short duration, explosive, like loaded sprints or sprints, things like that. Again, like those, you're going to take 2 to 3 weeks to start to adapt to those. So again, kind of going through the how. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but I want to leave them here for everybody to kind of walk away with. This is based on Joel Jamison's work. This is not mine, but these are different types of methods that you can use here. And these guidelines, some of these are for strength training, but you don't have to do that. You can make these sprinting out on the practice field, things like that. So we've got cardiac output method, or just kind of like that, what you think of when you think of like steady state conditioning. You've got tempo method, which is just kind of helping the muscle kind of improve how your body uses oxygen. And then you've got explosive repeat. Again, you can kind of take these and mix these methods up in season, whether that's playing games with the teams, whether that's part of your strength training leading up to the season. These are kind of like lower intensity methods to be able to use. These are kind of medium, moderate intensity methods. This is where things like circuit training kind of fall. And so again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time going through these, but they're here for you to look through and be able to utilize on your own, and again, make them your own. And then these higher intensity methods. Again, you're really looking at improving power production for those fast twitch muscles and being able to sustain like really high speeds for a lot longer when you're getting into these. And I do want to point something out here. We're looking at training frequency. You don't need to do this stuff every day. These are things that you can do, once a week. For a lot of these, twice a week might be better, but to just make sure that you're showing improvements, or at least maintaining what these athletes have throughout the season. And same thing with these higher methods. Just sometimes doing these things just once a week is going to help maintain things through the season. So it shouldn't take a ton of time away from practice, or you can work it into your practice plan. Training residuals just means, I think this is important, just how long do these conditioning qualities stick around? especially when you have athletes who play multiple sports, or they're injured, or they're going through, if some athletes get an off season, you can still go through certain periods and the retention is going to stick around. So what we're looking at here is if you have that kind of like slower aerobic base, sometimes that stuff's, it might feel like it goes away quickly, but really you're going to retain those qualities for anywhere from 2 weeks to, over a month. So that means that they're fairly durable. So if you've got an athlete who hasn't done any type of conditioning for 2 weeks, it's going to be pretty easy for them to kind of get that stuff back. Strength is kind of the same thing. So especially like max strength or like your heavy squats, deadlifts, things like that. Those things, they take a while. The longer you do these things and build up a longer workload or a longer training age, then these things are going to stick around for a much longer time. So again, that's kind of that 2 weeks to, over a month that stuff's going to stick around. So that's why, especially strength training in season, like sometimes just getting in some high intensity but short sessions is going to help, again, maintain and even continue to increase strength through the season. Glycolysis, so kind of like your repeat sprintability, same thing. That stuff still sticks around for quite a while, 10 to 21 days. Repeat sprintability, pretty similar. You might see a drop in people's ability, but you're going to get it back fairly quickly. Explosive power, so when we're getting down to these other two at the end, your explosive power and your just full out velocity, how fast can you sprint? These are a little more fragile, meaning they fade a little bit quicker. So we want to make sure, again, like that's where doing, powerful lifts and loaded jumps and loaded sprints, and even just high speed sprints in season, to make sure that you don't lose the ability to do those things in season. Because, again, the retention is less than a week for these two. And so you're going to end up, if you haven't sprinted for a week, you're going to start to lose the ability to do that. So just keeping that in and kind of sprinkling that in throughout the season is going to be important. I think the other part is just athlete buy-in for conditioning is always tough. I was an athlete in high school. Of course, I hated conditioning, but I also felt like there was never really a plan in place. So I think having a progressive plan and sharing that with the athlete can be really valuable, so they know where this is going. And those early season and early parts of conditioning shouldn't be there to just, crush the athlete. And so I think having that progression can kind of help athletes buy in with that. And again, use these principles to work into your practice plans. Make this work for you. You don't have to copy these templates, but again, you're welcome to. Workload management, higher minute players use less extra conditioning, quote unquote. Lower minute players, you got to keep their floor high, especially if they get into a game, if something happens and somebody's injured and they're out and you've got this lower minute player, and you want to make sure that they've been continuing to work because they haven't been playing the minutes of the other player. And I think staying away from that kind of conditioning grind, like you want to get quality work and over that kind of survival mindset where you're just trying to get through the line drills, get through the suicides, and know that you're just trying to get quality work in to just inch that closer and just become a little bit better at that conditioning portion and that repeat sprintability. So again, I think letting the athlete know and getting that buy-in can kind of help with the intent through these practices. Okay, so it looks like we had 3 questions come in, so I'll keep the screen up in case we need to go back for any of these. The first question: how do you approach conditioning for athletes getting less game minutes? Okay, so we just kind of, just started to answer that a little bit. I'll go into that a little more. I think it's, if you have help with other coaches or if you have an athletic trainer, it's nice to, if they can kind of help you almost put athletes into buckets. Like if you've got athletes who are playing full game minutes and you're playing 2 to 3 games a week, those are kind of those higher minute players. So they don't necessarily need that extra conditioning through practice. They might not, that might just push them a little over the edge. So I think you could kind of bucket these players into high, medium, low, ideally, where especially these lower minute players, if you're looking at a graph of how much distance they've covered throughout the week compared to the high minute players, it's obviously going to be less. So we want to make sure that they can kind of make up for that throughout the week with just conditioning, whether that's at the end of practice or even at the end of games, might kind of help with that. I know that they might not like that, but at least having a plan in place for them to keep that that floor high. So I hope that helps. Okay, so the second question, what about injured athletes in practice? Any tips? Yeah, I think if you have an injured athlete that maybe isn't able to run, especially if it's like a longer term rehab, like an ACL rehab or something like that, we want to make sure that you can again keep their floor high. So we'll go back to training residuals here. So again, like if you've got somebody who's out for 6, 9, 10, 12 months, obviously they're, aerobic base, all of these things are going to decrease. And so we want to make sure that if they're at practice and they can get some aerobic work in, I think having a bike on the sidelines is really awesome if that's doable. Just if they can't run, at least they can get some aerobic work in. And I think the other way you could do this if you don't have a bike out there, I think you go back to some of these methods where, you could even look at like doing some sort of circuit training where you're getting them moving and kind of clearing that with the athletic trainer, their physical therapist or surgeon or something like that. Like, hey, can we at least do like med ball slams or, kind of strength circuits where you're doing these kind of lighter body weight circuits, but you can go back to this kind of circuit training and make sure that you're looking at the 3 to 4 sets of 20 to 30 seconds. And you're doing stuff like that to kind of have a plan in place for them at practice so they can keep those things up, especially if they don't have a bike or something like that. But I think that's helpful, again, just to have a plan for those athletes while they're on the sideline. Okay, so we had one more question. What if we don't have the luxury of an off season or preseason? Yeah, so obviously, club sports, school sports, they especially if we're talking about high school athletes, especially if we're talking about high school athletes who play multiple sports, which is great. You don't really have like a planned off season or preseason. So again, I'm going to go back to the training residuals here. Again, how long do these qualities stick around? So, you might not need to go through like a ramp up period. It might just be like you're almost just like microdosing certain qualities in throughout the season. So if they're coming off a season or they're kind of almost always in season, which we do see a lot, we just want to make sure that they're keeping these 3 things, this repeat sprintability stuff, the explosive power stuff, the speed stuff, continuing to do that like once or twice a week to make sure that they have the ability to continue to do that, basically, because those things are going to drop off fairly quickly, obviously. So especially like if we're talking about like hamstring pulls and things like that, like that's a big load. If you're sprinting as fast as you can, those hamstrings are working really hard. So we want to make sure that you're exposing your body to those things consistently. Like I said, even if it's like once a week. If you do have an athlete that you don't have an off season, preseason, and they've kind of continued to build up like some of these, their aerobic base and strength base and things like that, then just make sure that you're hitting the higher intensity things, even if it's not like a bunch of frequency, even if it's like once a week. I think that would help with those. Perfect. So, all right, I'm gonna stop sharing. Yeah, like I said, let us know if you have any questions. I hope this presentation was helpful and just give some insight on how to handle some of these team sports and just give some ideas on how you can design your own sessions and things like that. So again, feel free to shoot me an email. I'm always happy to help answer questions about these things and kind of help just design some of these on your own. So all right, y'all, thanks.